what comes to mind when we sat down together about a month ago to try to make sense of this, and there was this stage of, I call it just do it. David, you described it as triage, trying to prioritize what was important here. And in an essential retailer, it was get those shelves full. And a subset of that was, can we simplify the SKUs so we can actually focus? The second stage was, in my mind, a transformation, because we need to have capabilities when we relaunch to actually be able to see what the consumer really looks like at that stage and then be able to adjust them. And if we haven't developed those capabilities during this, let's call it quieter period, we are going to try and adapt something which didn't work in 2019 and isn't definitely going to work in post-COVID-19.
Welcome and thank you for joining me today. My name is Gary Newbury. I'm a senior executive on call helping businesses in the make-move sale flow of consumer goods and services. My purpose is to inspire business leaders, particularly those within the consumer products and retailing space, to think big, be bold, scale, adapt and win, one epic supply chain transformation at a time. There's additional content available through my website, RetailAID.ca, or on my YouTube channel, RetailAID. Be sure to check it out. As the business world faces much volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, organizations need to be tapping into resources with an inside edge on transitioning their teams to be agile, innovative, and digital, with thought leaders, experts, and senior executives who have mastery of operational turnarounds and strategic transformations to help reorientate their enterprises. There's great material to get through here, so let's get started.
This is a Retail Insider podcast. You're listening to a special edition. Welcome to this special edition of The Weekly by Retail Insider. I'm Lee Rivet, and with the ongoing turmoil being experienced across the country by retailers large and small, we've gathered a panel of 3 retail experts to chat about the impact of COVID-19, chaired by our very own Editor-in-Chief, Craig Patterson. Now, the bio for all 3 guests can be found in our show notes, and they include David Ian Gray, who's the founder and strategist of Dig360 Consulting, who also spoke with Craig during our March 24th podcast about the COVID-19 impacts. Our second member of the panel is Gary Newbury, who specializes in transforming retail supply chains and also spoke with Craig during our April the 8th podcast, discussing the click and collect and supply chain strategies during COVID-19. Our final panelist is George McInnes, who is the CEO of the Inception Retail Group and has written retail books including The Last Retailer Standing and The Great Transition. So without further ado, let's listen in on the COVID-19 discussion between these gentlemen and their assessments on the impacts to Canadian retail.
Hello, this is Craig Patterson. I'm the editor-in-chief of Retail Insider, and this is a special edition of the Retail Insider podcast. We've got our team of experts here, and we're going to be talking today about a few things. We're going to be talking about consumers, essential retailers, non-essential retailers, and all kinds of stuff in between. So welcome, gentlemen.
Hi, Craig. Welcome, Craig.
Hey.
Let's talk a little bit about the consumer. What are the key factors that are currently top of mind and shaping the thoughts and concerns of consumers right now in Canada?
What I think of the critical 5. And the critical 5 are about confinement. How long will this be? The government's metering out 2 or 3 week, 4 week limits. I think that if the government had actually said, just stay in your home till summertime, that might have caused a degree of civil unrest. But every time a release of a new period of time comes out, we are more settled in our mind about that. The other one is financial capacity. The longer we are confined, our financial capacity is more and more restricted, because if we haven't got our full income coming in, yet we've still got bills to pay, they don't change. The other one is people's exposure to the virus, either directly or indirectly. In terms of directly, I'm talking about maybe at worst case is somebody in your household catches this somehow, or indirectly, if you're in a situation where you're watching, say, CP24, literally 24 hours a day, you'll start to become somewhat catastrophized about this, because it's like you'll see all the developments in real time. The fourth one is, if I've been laid off by my company, I might feel confident at the start that it's just a short period of time, but actually, there's a point in time where maybe the visibility of companies like this retailer have gone out of business or having real big problems. I start to get very worried about, will I be able to return to work? What does my future income stream look like? I think one that probably isn't so easily spoken about is one about the sense of abundancy. Well, I can go to, any grocer and see a really wide selection of food I can have, go to, the big box stores and pick up loads of stuff. And all of a sudden, things have changed. For some grocery stores, I have to stand outside. When I go inside, there's empty shelves. Things that I really want, they're not there anymore. My whole sense of abundance has really been compressed to, I think I'm in real scarcity. So I'm in a really quite a concerning position on these 5 fronts. So guys, I don't know if you want to chip in on anything else, which I may have missed in that.
When we spoke about this in the early days, there was something you just said, Gary, that you were talking about consumers. We're changing our roles a little bit. In a Western economy anyway, like in the society I grew up in, consuming things, getting things, having things, that was a big part of what our behavior was. Like, I think it's starting to erode a little bit. I think at a macro level, we are not just becoming less consumerist because we can't go to the store. I think it's deeper than that. And I kind of wonder, coming out of this the other side, how long will it take for us to, if ever, get back to that level of our psyches being geared to having, buying, consuming, that whole thing about the experience economy, right? Like everything was inundated around that. So that's just a thought of feeding off what you were saying.
Well, I feel the same way about the consumers and their values that are being reshaped at home. I'm reading data that's showing how much more consumers are moving towards online, and they're testing the waters, they're becoming more comfortable. That is definitely happening. And then the other side of the coin, I wonder about the workplace. Are we going to be okay with bringing everybody back to work, whether they've had the virus or not? Or are we going to hire people only that have had the virus? And this is a really contentious little place that I'm going to. Are you only going to hire people who've been tested and have had it, and tested it or immune, right? How does that change the workplace, and how does that change the dynamic of the consumers? How many of them can go out and spend, and where are they going to go and shop? It's very complicated, right? And I hope Canada is not one of those countries that moves in that direction, but there are countries that will, because they need to safeguard themselves.
And this is kind of, where I was thinking that we got to think about different stages of change that are happening, because I think people are settling in a little bit now. There's a bit of a predictability to the day-to-day while they're still in isolation. But I think we're seeing anything that's related to home office has been taking off. Anything that's been related to the families that have kids at home and education. So like iPads and Chrome devices, tablets has really surged. And that the expectation would be it's for home use in the home office, but probably for kids and their learning environments. And then fitness. So there's consumption going on, and then you've got your groceries and necessities. As we're coming out of this, I think people are getting a little squirrely. So out here on the coast, BC, we're a little ahead on the seasons. The garden centers are doing a record business right now for this time of year. So I think people are now getting into, can I make things? Can I create? Can I craft? Can I do something? But I'm being busy, but it seems to be more purposeful than just watching Netflix. These are all things that we can see how they play out.
David, just before you move on, the interesting thing is this. I mean, I do quite a lot of projects around the house, and I use weekends to do loads of projects. For those people who kind of think, I'll do that today, right, I just get some stuff from like one of the big box stores, Home Depot, Canadian Tire, Lowe's, whoever. I'll put my order in, and it's 3 or 4 days. I've just ordered some grass seed. I'm going to do some grass seeding. That was ordered on Monday, and then my wife just picked it up just now.
I know, but I think we're going to live with that. Like, I think at the end of the day, there's pre-COVID thinking, and then there's COVID and post-COVID thinking. And I think as consumers, we're just going to have to realize a lot of our expectations that we're surging, like the retailers and brands always create monsters for themselves. That whole Bay Days, everything's on sale at Black Friday and Christmas nonsense. The industry created that, consumers didn't. And this whole idea that the consumer's king and we can ask any unreasonable thing we can possibly dream up in our heads, and then someone's got to serve us that, or we're going to complain about it on social media. I really think there's going to be a hard pause on that. That's going to be a hard stop for a little while anyway. And we're just going to be grateful we can do anything. And what's interesting on the online side of this is, I think for the laggards who weren't used to online shopping, Gary, and we've spoken about this, they're coming into the game now, right? So they don't know what to expect, but they're now teaching themselves, yeah, I can click here, click there, the thing arrives. You've made the point to me a couple of times that the experiences for those who are savvy online shoppers are kind of disappointing right now. Like the wait times are long, curbside isn't quite working. So that is going to be interesting to see. There's going to be newbies coming in who are kind of, I'm into it now, and they'll stick with it. The ones who are getting a bit disappointed, I don't know if they're going to ever, like in June or July or August, get angry though if something isn't there same day, like they might have 2 months ago.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from there, but imagine that they could perfect their click and collect, because at the moment, well, up until about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I would order something and it might actually be in America or somewhere else, and Amazon would get it to my doorstep the next day. And that would be across a very wide assortment of products, all on Prime. I can get it the next day. I don't care where it's coming from. So my expectation from that, from being a regular Prime shopper, is click and collect. I should be able to do it the same day, maybe next day. But the retailers, I know we're all under a lot of pressure, especially with staff and trying to figure it all out. But wouldn't it be a big win for these retailers to actually work out how to get it done in the same day?
They would kill the competition if someone were able to solve those things. There's going to be a real dog eat dog kind of battle for consumers coming out of this. Like, and I agree 100%. The next phase is, how do we get our customers back and not lose them to the other guys, and how do we gain some of the other guys' consumers, because we've lost revenues. We've got to hit the ground running.
And it's going to be crazy, right? I anticipate the consumers are going to be looking, but just to take it from your point, Gary, in terms of service, customer experience itself is being redefined into speed, right? How fast can I click and collect, right? If your site is slow, you're doomed. If your site is fast and I can't pick it up, I have to wait half an hour or an hour longer than you told me. You know, it's a scenario of a domino effect that the experience is going to be communicated to everyone, right? But at the same time, you know, you've got less customers, less public going out to shop, right? And I'm going to throw a number out because I've been trying to postulate to myself, how bad could it be, right? And I'm going to say that there's probably 20% of the consumers out there who are so petrified of COVID-19, they're not coming out until the all clear has been blown and there's the treatment and the vaccine is there, right? I really believe that it's that big a number. And then you have that another 20% who are going to be driven more by, you know, I'm going to go and shop, I want to experiment, but it's going to be that risk shopping, right? So you're at 35 to 40% of the public being afraid. Now you've got 60% that are out there who want to shop. So you've got a lot less consumers that are going to be comfortable trying to go store to store with a mask on, most likely. I think New York State just passed that law. They signed it yesterday, that everybody, if you're out in public, you got to be wearing a mask. I can't imagine we wouldn't do the same. And at the same time, when you're doing that, you're going to want to attract more traffic to your doors, right? Your online site or your doors. You're going to be fighting so much harder for every customer. And I said earlier, I was talking to somebody that runs an agency, and they were just basically saying, you know, they anticipate a lot of pent-up demand in business coming their way once they have a pretty good idea when the door is going to open, and that their clients are going to want to push really hard to drive more traffic into their doors. Because I think I said that earlier before we were on, that anyone who's not open, we all have a level playing field. right? You may know some of the brands very well, but I'll tell you how many brands are forgettable, right? And you're going to have to work hard again to rebuild that relationship with the public. And are you still open, right? You're going to have to tell the customers, look, we're still open, we're still operating, or we've reopened, and I think a publication I put out, I'm saying, don't say reboot, start relaunching, start thinking like an entrepreneur in order to get out there and be more successful. And I worry that a lot of retailers, restaurants, whatever they're doing, they're gonna try and reboot. Just open the door and hope somebody comes in.
I agree, but I hope they're not trying to be too nuanced and fancy about it. I think this is going to be about basics.
Yep.
And it could even be, I'm seeing restaurants now going to very short menus for their takeout and delivery. One of the guys in our team, Rick Bahonis, ran Urban Barn for years, and he was saying if he was doing that again now, he would be opening very slowly. Like he would be maybe shortened hours, even unless he's mandated by a landlord, but do it right. And I think what right is going to be is just not special mirrors for ordering and clicking or any of those sort of customer experiential. I mean, it's going to be about the customer for a while. It's just going to be about doing basics, but I do think it's about being relevant. And there's a real leg up for the guys who are essential service, who have extended items, right?
There's a lot of stuff in there, but what kind of comes to mind is when we sat down together about a month ago to try to make sense of this, and there was this stage of, like, I call it just do it. David, you described it as triage, trying to prioritize what was important here. And in an essential retailer, it's like, get those shelves full. And a subset of that was, can we simplify the SKUs so we can actually focus? And the second stage was, in my mind, it was like a transformation, because we need to have capabilities when we relaunch to actually be able to see what the consumer really looks like at that stage and then be able to adjust them. And if we haven't developed those capabilities during this, let's call it quieter period, we are going to try and adapt something which didn't work in 2019 and isn't definitely going to work in, post-COVID 19.
But Gary, what's interesting is that the operators that are still open and providing essential services, the Walmart, the Costco's, the Loblaws of the world,
Yep.
They are learning very quickly how to adapt to all of this, right? They are preparing for a pandemic economic market. Right, they get it. And what I got a report from, it is really brief. There's three technology movements that have not changed at all since the downturn, and it's movement to the cloud, digitization of enterprises, and automation. That has not changed. It is still moving forward. So that there are retailers and businesses out there still making moves in these directions.
What's happening is we got to be careful we don't talk about the consumer or retail, because there's so many variants. There's so many versions of the story going on simultaneously. So there's consumers that are pretty well off, who are continuing to be pretty well off. And I mean, if we're going to say anything, I think for both consumers and retailers, the gap between have and have not is going to widen on both sides. And so it's not like there's one universal story about the retailer, one universal story about the consumer. For me, if I was a retailer, would be, I need to heighten our ability and really speed it up, like Gary's saying, to build resiliency into our business and to be ready, to be game ready. And I would tell people to go take vacay right now, because when the doors open again, you're not sleeping for a few weeks. If you thought it was crazy shutting it down, get ready for the opening, and that includes the leaders. Like, I wonder how exhausted leaders are, our political leaders, our corporate leaders. What's your decision-making capacity like right now? Not knocking anyone, just saying there's a toll that's being taken here.
Yeah, so the stress level is high.
We'll see how. Yeah, but I think you're right. But when the door is open, for all the reasons you said, but everyone's going to be in different situations, and some of those retailers were limping out of holiday last year.
Will, but what's interesting about what you're saying is that there will be new players because of this too. Yeah, right. Yeah.
There's opportunity all over the place as well. People are, entrepreneurs who built these businesses are entrepreneurs, and my only worry about that one is, we may see, as bad as retail is going to get hit, the decimation of independent retail and restaurants. And the reason that matters is, where's your next Aritzia coming from. It was hard enough anyway.
Do we see it won't be necessarily the most adaptable that survives this current period? It'd be like the ones with the biggest balance sheets possible are going to survive, and maybe not for right reasons. They just happen at this cycle of time. Have got a very stacked up pile of cash, and they can weather this storm, and they may survive at the cost of some of those guys who we really want to kind of encourage. Come on, guys, you can do better than this. Come on, push yourself through. But they get swamped just by running out. Their cycle of cash is maybe upside down to the bigger balance sheeted companies. Do we see that there's a risk of industry or category consolidation?
In my world, yes. And there will be opportunities for roll-ups to start consolidating certain sectors of, and they're consumer facing, and you're going to have to figure them out because some of them are complicated, some are not. But yeah, the opportunity is there for certain. And, I hate to say it, but you'll be buying them at bargain prices because that's just what is going to happen. But you're going to have to pick them up long before they close because at that point, nobody wants them. So there are opportunities that are going to come to do that. The bigger M&As, I don't know. I mean, you have to be in a lot of pain, and you're the fourth or fifth in the line before somebody's going to really want to pick you up. And really today, why would you pick it up? Why would you buy someone who's, if you're competing in the same marketplace, why bother? Unless Amazon was going to buy another grocer and they were going to buy somebody in Canada, then I could see possibly that you'd want to compete for that, right, to keep it out of their reach. But at the end of the day, if a grocer is going to go under, which I doubt, why would you do it? Why not let them go under? It's a tough message to make, but it's reality.
An acquisition or a merger of a fairly big scale, it takes a lot of cash for maybe a year to 2 years to really, if it really is a merger type situation, it takes a lot of pain to get through pushing the two organizations together. So if you're talking about that kind of deal making, I wonder, it'd be very selected circumstances. I'm not sure if I see any obvious ones, but you can imagine like the sales that are going to happen, the deep discounting that's going to occur. And that's on the consumer end, but you'd also think it's going to be cents on the dollar if you're trying to pick stuff up. And yes, there's opportunities, but what you have to do something with the opportunity. So I don't know. I think George, that's sort of George's domain though. More like, would Alibaba buy anything? Any of the big Asian players? I don't know. I'm just curious though. Do we think beyond our borders of Canada or even North America when we're having that discussion?
It really depends on the brand, right? Who it is. Right now, I don't see a lot of players making moves internationally. Why would you at this stage? It would be suicide. If somebody wants to get into a retail market like Canada, would you buy someone who's generally doing okay to learn the marketplace? Yeah, I could see that happening. Even now that we've known over the last few months prior to this that there were retailers that were going to come into Canada, opening up in different malls. I'm curious. Are they going to go through with it now?
Well, and plus, are they going to pay what the old rates were? I mean, Craig, we get into a whole thing about landlord-tenant right now. There's a tendency to look to the negative, but there's going to be a ton of opportunities for very creative solutions. And that could be like within organizations that have the cash on hand to do something with the ideas.
You're right. Wherever there's risk, there's always opportunity, right? And that's, and this is, this is a human tragedy, actually. It really is, right? I mean, it's over 2 million people, almost 2.1 million today, I think, and over 100,000 people gone, and you don't know, and no idea when this is going to end. But opening retail up, opening businesses up gives you hope, right? And I think that's part of the only reason I think if I get excited about it, it's only because there's hope, right? If you kept this closed up for past June, my God, I don't know what to think then. That would really worry me. Right now, middle of May, if that's where we're targeting, at least in Ontario, that's the last one we heard, I think, Gary. And that's not too bad. But if we start getting into June and late June or early July, that would concern me.
Well, and going back to what you guys led with, that predictability is really what's been missing. And talking to some of the essential service operators, they're consumed with the fact that in every jurisdiction they're operating in, both federally, provincially, municipally, they're getting new directives.
As you know, I spent my early part of my career in the restaurant industry with PepsiCo, and my question is, so when you look at the restaurant industry, you've got health inspectors, you got the big chains have got a lot of health and safety practices that exceed what the health board even asks for. Yet, we're about to reopen. We've got a major health scare. So who is regulating what is safe, what that safe environment is?
Yeah.
What's the spacing like in a retail store? How many customers can you let in at a time? Those are all the questions that I have at this stage, because I believe that's going to be on the mind of the consumer as well, right? Is it safe for me to, because you're so comfortable waiting in a queue, right? And they may not like it, but they feel safer waiting in the queue and knowing that for every one person that goes into Costco, one's coming out, right? They're keeping the traffic to a good spacing. I'm really curious how that's going to be managed going forward. We know the essential retailers that are open are doing some things right, but at the end of the day, what about everybody else once they start opening? Small retail stores that are 800-900 square feet, how do you manage it in there?
I really feel for the retailers, because they're having to make decisions without, even the guidance is kind of suggestive. And Ottawa is very different in how they're handling local situations than Vancouver's, for example. So how do you run a national chain like that?
They've got health and safety people who are trained in looking at risks and doing stuff and coming up with great schemes of things. We shouldn't have to wait for government to tell us how to behave.
No, but you're giving a situation, but how often have you ever seen retail operate flawlessly? It's really complex. There's thousands of employees that every day are absorbing direction, and you're always going to spot the exceptions to the rule. The bad ones, it's going to be commonplace. The good ones, you're still going to spot.
I'm listening to you, David. I think the other part of it, this is that, work from home is not going to change, not for a while.
No.
Right? And that's going to really perpetuate some major changes to a lot of things. And I tell even here, just doing Zoom, I was telling Gary earlier when we get on, we're struggling. I sit on a couple of boards, and we're struggling on finding automation like this that is actually secure, right? Because how do you do this without somebody not tapping in? And and I think that's going to be really critical. Back to your point, David, about working with teams in retail, right? Are regional managers really going to be able to visit that many stores at one time? You got to be very impactful. You can't travel to them. You got to be so impactful. You're going to have these meetings, these team meetings on Zoom or on sites like this, right? Where your managers and you are working towards those objectives, daily, right? And rehearsing your safety steps, rehearsing, how you're going to greet customers and manage traffic in your store. That's the world, right? But like you said, we're so adaptable, right? Because we have to be quick. Well, it's the quick and the dead in retail anyway. But you have to be so quick and to adapt operationally, right? And this technology, this Zoom, for example, is great, but it's going to have to get far better than it is today.
Craig, I think a challenge back to you is, what are the questions that no one is asking? I think there's a meta question. It's about how we're thinking right now. And I think it's asking the right questions at the right moment. And that could be fun, but it's also a challenge.
Yeah, I think one of the questions people are asking is how are the stores going to reopen, and how are the shopping centers going to deal with this when people start trickling in and are still afraid?
Yeah, and maybe what is a shopping center going to be in 2 years? How do we redefine some of these concepts and make them productive, but not just, there's a fear I have that we want to hang on to the past sometimes. And I do it too. We all do it, right? In my business, how do I I've built something. How do I keep that going? I think the challenge is let go of the stuff that doesn't matter, but what are we building for the future?
Let me give a perspective on that, because I spent the last 2 or 3 days trying to right, from our conversation from a week ago, I've tried to encapsulate my thoughts, and it's a pretty long paper, and I posted it onto my LinkedIn profile as an article, and I'll send you a link to it. But it kind of goes like this. For the last, well, beyond the scope of most people's career in terms of timescales, we have thought the way to grow businesses has been just to go big. Go large everywhere. Go large number of stores, larger stores, large number of items in the assortment. Just grow the business by being large. And we've done that decade after decade after decade. And I think that as I hear increasingly comments about the bifurcation, I've pronounced that correctly, about retailing going luxury or value end, and there's this middle bit that's rubbish, chuck it out. I actually think, and I think George has said this in the past, is the middle will reform. And as I went through the paper, I was trying to get to what does the middle kind of look like. I didn't really have that question in my mind, but it suddenly occurred to me the middle is a halfway house between the mass merchandisers and big grocers. Those big box stores like Lowe's and Home Depot won't particularly change their format. The luxury stores will broadly keep where they are, and the bit in the middle may actually be a miniature version of what these stores used to look like, being very focused about, even at subclass level, they're not going to be a whole category. They're just going to focus in and deliver personal service. And that might be the trifurcation, if there's such a word, how the middle will rebuild. And once we take that logic, a smaller format store, given the conversation we had about Mouse the other day, that they're going to more mixed use. If I'm a big box store, I'm never going to get into a Mao in the mixed use. But if I'm a smaller, adaptable, quick, agile concept, I can get in there and get out if I need to be. But I could be, in a stack of other stores, which are very complementary to what I sell, 20 stores in a mixed use facility with some entertainment, some food, some condominiums, some offices, whatever. And I could see that how the Mall could survive with that level of retailing in it. It's just a sliver of retailing, not a whole bunch of retailing to the exclusion of everything else. And I suggest that if you have a chance, have a read of it. It was a bit bumpy towards the end because I've got to finish this today, so it became a bit less structured. But I think that we've been brought up on retailers have been brought up on a go large underlying philosophy. That's how we grow businesses: scale it, make it big, get the economies of scale. Then we can compete on price. Let's go to China to get our stuff because we can compete even more on price. So it's all about big and complex. When actually I think that we may find that our forward picture on the middle ground of retailing is much more smaller format stores. And if you have a Sage around you, it's that kind of idea where you have just a small selection of goods, highly trained people giving personalized service. And when you're going to that store, there's a story and you know what you're going to get. There's nothing more, just that solution to that problem.
I've made up my mind on what the middle is.
Okay.
And it's the independents. It really is the independent retailers. If you take a look at some of the restaurateurs that are out there who have opened up, a variety of different restaurants, right? But they've really consolidated their supply chain. They've done a lot of good things that way. And some of them own 8, 10, 12 restaurants. I really see that the middle could be the independents, because you've got the mass merchants and you've got the higher end. That middle is the unique opportunity that the independents have, right? Because because as you said, you want that experience and everything. Now, it may not happen today because of the way things are, but in a couple of years, you'll see all that flesh out very quickly, because retailers will have to get a lot smarter and diversify themselves a little bit more than just behind one concept. And you'll see that coming out. I do believe that that's where the middle is going to lie. It has to end up somewhere, because the middle is not going away. It's just going to redefine itself, and that's where it's going to land if the retailers are smart about it.
And when we speculate, we like to speculate around sort of some extreme possibilities, because that's what we're doing. one of the possibilities and plausibilities is we actually get back to something akin to what we had before, but different. But I think the warning shot was heard that there'll be other issues that hit retail in a substantive way, including an economic issue that's going to last. So if you get through this and you're able to change, you've got to then speed that up. If you don't make it, it'll reconstitute itself. It always has. And there's human beings out there with talent. They'll find their ways into other situations, you know. But George, I think you hit the nail on the head.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Sure. Bye-bye, guys.
And that's our special edition podcast with 3 Canadian retail experts discussing COVID-19 and the Canadian retail environment. Just a reminder, links to the biographies for David Ian Gray, Gary Newbury, and George Minakakis can be found in our show notes. We just want to remind everyone that we do have an email newsletter that you can subscribe to that goes out every morning with a link to the Canadian news from around the web that we've curated from the previous day, as well as links to our exclusively published articles from Retail Insider. If you go to our website, retail-insider.com, you can find the subscribe area on our main page, and you can get that email to your inbox every morning.
Thank you for listening today. I hope the information has been valuable for you and your team. You can connect with me via the website retail.ca and go to the contact page, or via LinkedIn by typing linkedin.com/in/last-mile. Look forward to hearing from you and playing an active part with your supply chain and your business's transformation as you start to act boldly, think big, scale, adapt, and win.